Hello everyone, and welcome to this third video about endorsements and appeals in advertisement. And in this video, I'm going to specifically talk about appeals to consumers' fears. So fear is a very common type of theme in advertisements when it comes to certain messages that need to be transmitted. For example, over here on the right, you have a fear ad about the importance of wearing helmets on the motorbike. And therefore, it is important that we understand that the fear is it's much more tricky to work with when compared to humor, right? It's complete opposite, I would say. So fear, appeals to fear can be effective as a means of enhancing motivation. Yet there can be some ethical issues on the way that we use it. For example, many of you, and the reason I chose this commercial over here, this advertisement over here, is that many of you might not like this advertisement, might feel that it is not something that should be displayed. And indeed, here we have those issues, is that there are certain topics that are hard to talk about. All right, and fear can identify the negative consequences of certain things. It can identify the negative consequences of not using a product, like the example you have on the image there, and also about engaging in unsafe behaviors, for example, such as drink and driving. This is very common types of commercials or ads where you see fear being used. Now, fear can take the two main forms. It can take the form of social disapproval, and it can take the form of physical danger. And those are the two main themes that we find in fear when used in an advertisement. Now, the fear appeal logic can be broken down into a variety of things. So starting at the bottom and coming all the way down, we have that fear. First of all, we need to choose the appropriate intensity of the threat level. And there are two main things here that it will affect this. So should we make the commercial, like just a little bit of fear or a lot of fear? Or somewhere in the middle. But there are two main things here that will be affected by the intensity of fear. Number one, to stimulate the audience involvement with the message. So certain levels of fear can create, the higher the fear, the more involved most of the times the audience feels with the commercial. And finally, to promote the acceptance of the message arguments as well. Now, this will lead to consumers' motivations, all right, which will try to make them avoid some negative consequences. Once again, there are two main things here, like I said. We have the concept of physical danger, because you are engaging in an unsafe behavior, and you have the concept of social disapproval for not using a certain advertised product or brand. But at the end of the day, the objective is the same for both of them, okay? And indeed, you will tend as well to use in this consequence, trying to make people use a certain product. The third concept that you can use as well is the concept of scarcity, or the what we call psychological reactance, the fear of losing out on a certain promotion or on a certain ad. Fear does not need to be extremely like the example I just showed you before. It can be, for example, the fact that only a certain amount of units is available, or that this promotion only lasts a certain amount of days, and therefore if you don't take advantage, you're going to lose that opportunity. So using a little bit of less intense fear. So indeed, there are different degrees of fear. All right, there's low degrees, high degrees, but what we find that is that the degree to persuasive effectiveness, in other words, if you want to try to make people really engage with your brand and take a little bit more persuasive action towards your brand, you need to have a moderate level of fear. High levels of fear can create very negative responses towards your brand, while low levels of fear can create indifference towards your brand or towards your advertisement. So there's two main different strategies when using fear. Once again, there's a good example here on the right that is much more I would say it's less shocking and a much more moderate level of fear, where it says spare parts for humans are not as originals as those for cars. Don't drink and drive. Commercial ad by BMW. So indeed, a very good example of moderate level of fear being used. So I was saying that there are two major changes here, all right? There's two major points that fear can try to create. You can try to create, for example, a change behavior, and in that case, you would use the first option, where it says you have a fear appeal with a solution, all right? So the point of when you have a fear appeal with a solution, your objective is try to create danger cues, then try to create a danger control, and finally an adaptive action to solve that problem, to solve that fear, right? Second option is when you have a fear appeal that does not have a solution, then you create your fear cues. You create a fear control, and what you're trying to get is not an action, but more of an emotional response towards your message. For example, you might try to create anxiety in the person. So I would say that the previous ad that we've seen with the motorbike helmet advertisement, it was a fear. Here they were trying to create anxiety, all right, although there was a solution. And on this one, for example, they're trying to create a change behavior. It's more focused on that. But fear, for fear to be effective, there needs a couple things that we need to consider. Number one, we need to have the appropriate level of the threat, given the involvement of the target market, and we need a prominent solution, in this case your brand or your service, for the fear to be for the fear created. In other words, the best advertisements that use fear create the right level of fear for the right target market and then provide a solution. That's what most fear commercials that nowadays we see are.
What are we looking at? Formaldehyde, acrolein, nitrobenzene. This actually has over 7,000 chemicals. Don't get me started on what they do to you. Prematurely wrinkled skin, stunted lung growth.
Mr. Essler.
Tooth loss, cancer.
Mr. Essler.
Hang on.
If cigarettes looked as dangerous as they are, you'd run like hell. Find out the real cost of tobacco.
Now, this very creative advertisement that you really don't understand what's going on in the beginning, I find it really good. Indeed, it is creating the concept of fear towards trying to help people stop smoking. And, well, when you live in a country like France, where basically such a huge percentage of the population smokes, I sometimes find it a little bit weird that there's not more commercials or more ads trying to make people understand the dangers of smoking. But anyway, that's a discussion for another day. What is good about this commercial? It creates fear and it creates anxiety in a way that, you know, you don't really know what's going on, and only when it makes the connection towards at the end about if tobacco had such a visual element to it, you would probably change your behavior. But it's a very effective commercial because even though it's not very long, it's 30 seconds, it clearly has a message, and at the end it debuts that message with a solution with what should you feel. So it creates anxiety, it generates it creates fear cues, it creates fear control, and then it would create indeed that prominent solution at the end. So a very good example of a commercial. So fear is very tricky to use indeed, and fear can be one of the main aspects that certain brands will use. It will seriously depend on the message, and you really need to take into consideration the two things. If you're gonna use fear, then make sure the right amount of fear and provide a clear solution to that fear. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you on our next video. Let me know if you have any questions on the comment section below.